So there's going to be people out there still wondering whether or not now is a good time to get into the property market, right? If they should take the leap, should they go down the route? Those people who are sitting on the fence and wondering that, what do you say to people that are in that position?
When I speak to my parents or my grandparents about the values of their home, they never say to me, "Oh, I wish I purchased a home, 5 years earlier."
Hello and welcome back to the Home Seekers Podcast, the essential guide for navigating New Zealand property market with confidence and ease. I'm your host, Andy, joined again with Simon, Senior Mortgage Advisor here at Mortgage HQ. Look, Simon, our last podcast got an unbelievable amount of traction and a lot of different views, a lot of comments, and we are going to dive into those comments a little bit later at the end of the podcast because there's a lot of interaction there, a lot of really, really good stuff, and I think we should touch on some feedback on some of that. But what I want to touch on before that is even since we last spoke, there's been a lot of changes that have happened. The Q2 inflation numbers have come out, net migration numbers have come out. All of this has a massive impact in the property market. So I really want to touch on your thoughts and around how this data is going to shape where we are, and if your thought of the OCR not moving in November is actually maybe progressing a little bit faster than what we thought, because this data and the monetary policy and all of that is really dictating what's going on. So I want to sort of look at a few key indicators that I've seen. Right now, when it comes to properties on the market in New Zealand, there's about 20% more stock than there was this time last year. So with that being said, there's less people at open homes, but it then creates potential opportunities. But buying is still down. So what that's telling us is that there's opportunity, there's stock, but people aren't making the move. Do you reckon that is just because the interest rates are where they are? Do you think that could be because people have the ability to take their time? And we know taking the time isn't the best thing to do, because when things start ramping up, you've got to make decisions relatively quickly. So why do you think people are taking their time and trying to purchase property and not just going ahead with it?
I think it's because there's a lot of fear in the market still. Right, and like you said, there are high interest rates, and people are trying to calculate and number crunch, and so it is difficult to make the decision. I don't see, and a lot of other people don't see really the next boom, but it doesn't take much for those things to line up, and then the next door neighbour's buying a property, and my mum's buying a property, and my friends were buying one, and then suddenly it starts again, and that pushes the cycle onto its next trend.
And all of the information that's come out, we'll dig into that shortly, is probably going to potentially speed this process up. But with interest rate smoothing continuing to happen, even since we last spoke, we've seen changes. Yeah. Do you think that is going to speed the market up a bit?
Yeah, I think everyone's probably seen, the property cycle clock, right? And there's some indications that we are at the bottom, if not, ticking back up towards a boom cycle. And so that may take many years before we actually get to that. But there's a couple of things that I'm concerned with in terms of a long-term trend, is that usually we've had a pretty predictable cycle, mostly in Auckland, but definitely across the country, whereby you have like properties plateau, go up, plateau, dip a little bit, plateau, go up again. But what we had with COVID is we essentially had a double boom. Right? We had a boom. We plateaued for a little bit. Then COVID happened, and all the economists are saying, "Oh, watch out! Property prices are going to go through the floor." And then it went the opposite direction and boomed again. But that was out of kilter with regards to the timeframes of the cycles. So I'm very concerned now that it may actually take longer, and I think it's a good thing. We need to take longer. Yeah. There needs to be an equalization with where values are and incomes and things like this before we get to some real natural organic growth again.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that the time is going to be of the essence, but it is one of those things that's not a negative, because Kiwis have been so used to just go, want it now, and we saw what happened in the lower of the interest rates, right? But throughout this whole I guess, journey of property prices coming down, interest rates going up, with all of the changes in the banks and government side of things, there's a lot of people saying, oh, first home buyers are being disadvantaged. What about them? The investors always get the benefits, right? But we've seen 27% of all property purchases in the last month go to first home buyers. So that's still showing some continued strength in that area. Like, why do you think there is so much confidence in that first home buyer space?
I think it's because incomes haven't dropped significantly, but house prices have. So you're in a position where the affordability is better, and so people are getting into the position to be able to purchase their first home easier and afford those repayments.
Now, it's a little bit concerning, though, because if people are taking more time to make these decisions, now there's a big opportunity here, and that opportunity is not going to be sitting there forever.
No.
Right. And we saw when I purchased my home, I saw property prices slowly starting to creep up and up and up. And luckily enough, I got in early enough that it wasn't at the heights and what it got to. But I know if I didn't act relatively quickly on a property that I liked, opposed to waiting to see if there's something better, I might not be in a property today. So I guess the key thing is, right, if the right one pops up, the numbers work, you've workshopped it with your advisor, you should really be looking straight into like getting something on paper and doing your DD straight away, right?
Yeah.
Because there's good opportunities out there still.
Yeah, there's massive opportunities at the moment. I think situating yourself and putting yourself in a position that allows you to take action is really important because there's markets within markets. And what I mean by that is when you're at a auction and you want that property, that's the market, right, then and there, right? And so being in favourable where you can actually bid at auction puts you in a position of running.
Yeah.
So what I would say is put your life goals based on what you're wanting to achieve, not on things that you can't control, like the wider market and trying to make predictions on that.
Yeah.
I think the time you should be buying a home is, yesterday. We've heard this before, right?
Of course.
And so ultimately what I mean by that is that if you're in a position to do so, do it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a conversation last night with a client and they asked me what seemed to be a very simple question, and it was, is the RV, if I get a registered valuation of my house, is that what it's worth? And the honest answer is the house is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it, right, in this particular market, which is why the prices varied so much when demand was so low. When supply was so low, because when supply is low and demand's high, people will pay through the roof. And if you've got the interest rates to allow that to happen, it's the exact same thing, right? So I think getting fixated sometimes on registered valuations, capital valuations, we talked all about this in the last podcast anyway, isn't the right thing to do. Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? Look, if you're buying and selling in the same market, it just doesn't matter, right? I would have loved to sell in a seller's market and then bought now, it would be perfect, but that's not how that works. But the cost of living does play a massive part in property purchases, right? Now, we are starting to see inflation come down, and that was reported in the Q2 results. That is on the way back down. Now, the median rate that the RBNZ want to get this back into is around that 2% median rate, right, of inflation. Now, that looks like it could potentially happen within 3 to 6 months, a lot quicker than what was ever forecast, right? So if it does return inside the next quarter or two, do you think that's going to have an immediate impact on property prices?
Immediate? Yeah, that's a hard question. I don't think so. I think if you have a look at what happens going into summer generally, there is a bit of a bump there in terms of what property prices do. People come out of the woodwork, so to speak, and out of their cold cold season, so they stay at home. But so when people come out in the summer and start bidding at auctions, then there generally is an uptake. But is there going to be a massive increase in house prices going at the end of the year if inflation is under control and the OCR drops? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe some people want to push that a little bit hard to try, make you fearful. But no, I think I would hope to think that it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to see another boom start.
No.
Not too soon anyway.
Yeah. Now, because I guess that's the key thing is I should probably ask the question, like, what impact do you think it's going to have on property prices? Because an OCR reduction will have an impact on interest rates, right? But it's an interesting one because the interest rates is I guess something that factors in to your existing home loan or new home loans. But we know that serviceability or how much you can lend from the bank is based on the testing rates. So if we do start to see slow reductions like we have or softening on these interest rates, at what point do you feel that we're going to start to see a reduction in the testing rates from the bank?
Yeah, I think when the band gets a little bit too high, at the moment we're looking at it's 2.8. So once interest rates start to come down a little bit further, you may see some banks reduce their testing rate, which will allow you to borrow more.
Yeah, because it can't last forever, right? Because these interest rate drops are great for existing homeowners, but it doesn't mean anything when you're going to purchase new property right now because they're still being tested on the exact same rates. Now, hopefully we start to see a continuous reduction. Hopefully we start to see more confidence coming into the market because that's probably what any changes through the OCR is going to give, right? More confidence. Because right now we do have a oversupply under demand. The minute that demand starts to change, you're going to expect to see more people walking through the doors of open homes. And when people walk through more doors, it kind of gives more confidence to the person selling to hold on and maybe hope that they're getting a better price. Because that is also the other, I guess, side of the stick is that whilst there's a lot of demand right now, there's a lot of people out there that don't want to sell for the value that their property is at right now. But we've seen people that have had to take some pretty big cuts too, right?
Yeah. I think that's what's happening also also with the tax changes, that's probably affecting it, putting more stock on the market.
Yeah.
Now that Brightline, has been brought back to 2 years, people then can sell and pocket the profit, as opposed to putting 40% to tax. I think that affects it.
And I'm guess looking as well at where we are right now, we're looking at the market and we're looking at all this stock. When we are seeing a lot of these deals get across the line and people purchasing, we're still seeing the data is showing us that 52% of all fixed loans is 12 months and below, right? Now that's a pretty Kiwi thing to do anyway, right? I know around the world they don't really take that sort of structure. Every country is very different in the way in which they structure the mortgages, but New Zealand is very much a short term at a time, let's hope. Now, is that the right thing to be doing? What should we be doing instead if it's not?
Yeah, there's two ways to think about this. One, it's the risk that the economy and the banks and others take. For example, in America, there is a backing of that 30-year rate. How can someone fix them for 30 years? How is that possible when there's so many changes between that time frame? Well, there's a guarantee provided by Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's government-backed as well. So that's what puts that doorstop there. They've got a much bigger market. So it allows them to kind of allow that to happen. And you probably know this better than I do from an insurance perspective. But from New Zealand, little old New Zealand, I think it's much better for the banks to have these shorter term rates. That's why what they don't have. Remember they trialed that 10-year rate.
Yeah,
I think it was Resimac or something.
A while ago.
So what that does is provide much more lower risk for the banks and the wider economy, the financial economy. But if we're talking about our clients, then there are two ways to think about interest rates. Some people really try to hyper focus on trying to predict where they think interest rates are going. And so that's why, for example, in this time, they'll say, interest rates are peaking and they're coming down, therefore I'm only going to fix for short term. But essentially, I find it as a limited mindset. And the reason why is because if you work with any good investor, they don't care about the interest rate. What they care about is reducing risk and making sure that each project has its margin, right? So if you're paying 9% or 2% interest rate, it doesn't matter. You factor it in as a cost of the expense for the project. And if you're still making money at the end of it, it doesn't matter how much you paid in the interest, right? It's using someone else's money to complete the works. And so, but for a client that is, got their own personal home, they're looking to reduce risk, or they've got one investment property and an owner-occupied home, even though you're in this type of market, what and all the economists are pretty much predicting that interest rates are going to be coming down going into the end of the year. What I would say is that it doesn't hurt to go against the trend and say, well, everyone's saying that interest rate's going to be lower at the end of the year, so I'm just going to put everything on a 6-month rate. Well, instead, what I would recommend is, like, okay, let's put a decent amount on a 6-month, but let's put a little bit on a 1 year and an 18-month and maybe even a 2-year rate.
Interest averaging.
Yeah, and the reason why interest averaging approach is important is because it works. It works in reducing your risk. So no matter what interest rates do, you have an averaging effect.
Yeah.
And that major fluctuations aren't going to affect you when you come off those rates.
Now, I know a couple of months ago, it was very doom and gloom in this property market, right? Like, you're sitting here thinking, man, it's not looking good. And we're starting to actually come out of the clouds at the moment. And things are looking a lot more prosperous than what they would have been 6 to 12 months ago. So there's going to be people out there still wondering whether or not now is a good time to get into the property market, right? If they should take the leap, should they go down their route? Those people who are sitting on the fence and wondering that, what do you say to people that are in that position?
When I speak to my parents or my grandparents about the values of their home, they never say to me, "Oh, I wish I purchased a home, 5 years earlier, because I purchased at the peak."
Yeah.
Right. Because the sooner you get in, the sooner you have a little bit more control as to what you can do moving forward. Owning assets over a long period of time, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Right. And so get in early, and then work and chip away at it with a financial advisor to build a property portfolio, whether it may just be one or two, to get you to your income goals for retirement, but it's going to make all the difference. KiwiSaver and superannuation ain't gonna cut it.
Not just on their own, they're going to make up a part of the pie, but not if it's done correctly. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's too late to make that call now. But it's a lot there to do for the younger generation, which is what we try and teach them. But I had this thought actually myself today when I was having lunch. I was like, there are going to be people out there in a couple of years' time saying, man, you were lucky you purchased it, or you're lucky. There's no luck about it, right? It's literally calculated decisions that people make to purchase property at a time no one else is purchasing property, because we know that they're going to go up in value over the long period of time. It's a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I can't get myself over the mentality of people believing like you're lucky.
Yeah.
Like you've probably had that in the past too. Well, I know for a fact I've heard it saying that to other people. I might have said it a long time ago to others. Oh, you're lucky you managed to purchase at that period of time. It wasn't. There's no luck about it. For some people maybe, but there's no luck about it. You create your own luck.
Yeah. The harder I work, the more lucky I get.
Yeah.
And so I feel the people that say that type of thing most are the people that need to kind of justify the inaction that they're taking, right? Oh, that person got there because of luck or because of their parents or because of their upbringing or whatever it is, and they don't, internalize and say, what can I do now with what I've got? Yeah. And so that's what I'm all about, empowering people to be able to do what they can with what they have.
And it's why you're so good at what you do as well.
Thank you.
It's one of those things that I think sometimes you can only ever control. Well, you can only control the things you can control, right? There's no point looking at what other people have done and thinking they're lucky or being envious, right? Put yourself in a position where you can be one of those people. But one thing I want to make sure that we go through today was following last week's podcast. We had a lot of comments come through. It's kind of blown up a little bit, and I'm a little bit like, wow, this is really cool. So I've got some of the comments in front of me, and I want to run through some of them with you. I'm not going to go through all of them. Some of them here are really in depth. People talking about a few things that know what's going on around the world, which is really encouraging to see that we've been able to provide a platform for people to communicate. Like one of these comments has like 10 or 11 different replies of people talking between themselves, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
So really happy. But I want to talk. There's a few here that I do want to talk about. The first one. I'm not going to say who these are from, obviously, but one with regards to the changes that we talked about last week, which some of them obviously were capital gains changes and things like that. One comment here says, they're insane changes. Idiots are giving back huge advantages to property investors once again over first home buyers. Interest deductibility, 2-year capital gains, rents will not come down. Many of the city rates are up 20%, keeping inflation up. Like, I look at this and I think I'm a little bit perplexed, to be honest. Initial feedback on that with being...
I guess short term, you may think that these are advantages because they're being rolled back. But no, I think what they were unprecedented, unorthodox ways of approaching tax law. For example, the interest deductibility laws, that's insane. No other business is penalised in that manner. So I wouldn't say of it providing advantages, I'd say removing penalising aspects of it. And look, at the end of the day, no matter how much someone wants to think investors are not needed, they are absolutely needed in this market, and they provide a service for people.
Yeah.
They're picking up properties that first-home buyers will not buy.
Renovating them,
providing them back into the market. So it increases the pool.
Yes.
Right? The supply.
Yeah.
Which doesn't increase prices.
No.
And investors don't increase the value of a house.
No.
They don't. They match the true value by taking the property to the market. They've made a margin. First-home buyers are the ones that push up, or not first-home buyers, but owner-occupied buyers are the ones that push up the prices. They're the ones that are emotional. These professional investors know how much the property's worth, know how much the renovation is going to cost, plus they have to make a margin in there. So all of this is calculated. It's the first-home buyer that bids above those investors with emotion. Oh, it's perfect. It's across the road from my parents or whatever it is. And we have to live here. And so I think that's much more of a factor. And also, obviously, cheap interest rates and things like that perpetuate it.
And I think also to really highlight the fact on rents, right? The rent isn't dictated by the landlord, right? Yeah, well, in some way or form it is, but it's dictated by the person that can afford to pay that rent, right?
100%.
So now what we're looking at is that if rent keep going up, which by the way, I think it was 2021, the highest that went up was 7%. It's about 2% at the moment. So where it should be, because rents are more or less maxed out. If you keep increasing the rent, you then have unoccupancy, and unoccupancy is the most expensive thing for a landlord to have, because you've got the mortgage to pay yourself on a property that's empty. An empty property is a lot worse. Now, me as in my situation with our couple that have renting another dwelling of ours, we haven't increased their rent in 3 years, because my position is just that it's more valuable to have somebody who I trust, who I get on well with, inside that property, knowing that they're not going anywhere versus the other way around, right? Now, that's just me being very nice, right?
Good.
But we have to keep in mind that these changes to investors aren't pushing rents up. They're already at the cap. So that's sort of one thing just to keep in mind. The one thing that is, like, city rates are up. They are, like, we've seen rates for properties. Council rates are going up too. But I think
that's a different story. When you have mismanagement of funds and things going
different story. But unfortunately, as you said, investors and renters, they go hand in hand. Like, they work together. Ultimately, without the investor, you're not going to be able to rent a property.
100%.
Simple as that. So, look, I love these comments because it allows us to be able to have a bit more of a conversation. Real quick one, is CCCFA gone for home loans? That was such a mess. It was such a mess.
It's not gone.
It's not gone.
It's not gone, but it's been reviewed and changed, and it's more affected and able to be used for its intention, which is to protect the consumer.
Nowhere near as bad as it used to be.
In the respect that the complaints came from, right? So, I've spent a lot on over food and coffees, and therefore they take in all of these costs, not taking in a common sense approach of, actually, this person's renting, has disposable income, wants to spend it, and saving some, but they can cut all that back once they purchase a home because it's more important to them.
Of course.
So they can and they will, and they do.
So it's all about the diary entries, right? Like the intention of the client, not necessarily what's gone on. That does play a part, but it's mainly about what their attitude is going to be moving forward. Now, this one, it was a suggestion of something that we should have discussed, and we'll do it right now. Should have discussed the 60-metre granny flats or small houses people could put in their back gardens.
Yes. Yeah, the 60 square metre exemption.
Yep, this will help a lot of renters. The government should not charge people tax on the income from these small homes that would incentivize people to build them. It's a good move considering the market will never build enough homes, which is going to mean a lot of young people not having kids due to financial instability. And people who do have kids that may be on their benefits of income coming from their job. So I really quite like the thought process that, one, they shouldn't be taxed, but two, why isn't this happening more? I know we talk about it, and I am somebody that's got one of those on the property. There's some great advantages in doing so.
Yeah. It gets a little bit complicated with the tax question. I think that, look, it's income, you should be paying tax. But there's two ways of going about it. If you can argue that it's a border, then you can fit within the standard cost model, and you don't have to declare it as income. But there comes other complications with borders. You have to provide food and electricity, water, all that kind of stuff. So everything is paid for under the board model, and then you've got a standard cost model that you've got a maximum you can charge, that kind of thing. And the reason for that is simplicity, right? Instead of producing all your income and then producing all your expenses and showing that it kind of equates, and then including depreciation and all of that, and then not paying any taxes and going to have to log all that, then the idea is like, okay, just don't declare it, right? If you fit within this threshold and you meet these criteria. Now, with an extra dwelling at your house, though, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it is.
I don't see people going around to that extra dwelling and providing them meals every night.
No, definitely not. And
so they're not borders.
In most cases, there's a tenancy agreement in play.
Yeah, so tenancy agreement, bond, the fact that they'll pay their own power usually, if you've got a different meter, which is most probable. So it's much better to declare it. There's probably other aspects that you can depreciate and other things. But I think the 60 square meter granny flat out the back is a really cool idea, and I think there's a lot of people with existing rental properties that can add dwellings into the rental market,
or even the owner-occupied home that's got the ability to do the same.
Yep. So you paid off your home and you don't have quite enough to buy another investment property, but you need a extra income. These granny flats can provide massive yields. Yeah. Like I've seen them 11, 12, 15% gross yield on the cost. Now, you have to understand that you spend a couple of $100,000 and whatever it is to get that granny flat on the back, and the property may only go up in value in that amount. Yeah. So it is a consideration. You lose some of the privacy as well. But look, at the end of the day, I think there's brilliant options to fast track these things through. So, I'm all for it.
I think it's a great way to add value to a property. It's a great way to create opportunity for others, even extended family. Keeps the family close if need be, opposed to having to, you could sell a home and bring everyone together underneath the same sort of area. Now, the last last comment I've got here that I'll talk about is more of a question. It's like, are there properties in New Zealand that are undervalued? I kind of got the impression that they're all overvalued shoeboxes or garages with no insulation. So I'm guessing. It's quite funny. But are there properties in New Zealand that are undervalued? Most certainly, there are. 100%. Yeah. There most certainly are. They're not all undervalued shoeboxes, and they're not garages with no insulation. Right now, for you to rent out a property these days, we do have healthy home standards. That never used to exist, though, eh? No. And that means that these properties or garages have to have insulation, have to have heat pumps. They need to be well maintained and looked after. But most certainly you see it daily, probably properties undervalued.
I think the biggest value add is seeing things that other people don't see. Yeah. Right. And so there may be a certain aspect that the bank doesn't like that you have experienced to be able to get it sorted as soon as you purchase it. So you purchase it with majority cash, for example, don't need the bank, or utilize available equity in your existing portfolio. And then once you've sorted the COA out, for example, and then got that ticked off, you can refinance it at a much higher price. Yeah.
Look, I feel like that's all we've got for today. I've covered quite a lot and kind of get involved with these comments because it's really good to see what people are thinking and getting involved with the content as well allows us to create these videos. But I'm going to ask you one more question because we finished on it last week. You said that you don't believe the OCR is going to change in November.
Yeah.
Based on what we've learned over the last 7 days, has your feeling changed there?
I'm feeling more nervous about it.
About being wrong, or
yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think the Reserve Bank has been traditionally slow in their movements on both sides. Rates too high for too long, the rates too low for too long. I would hope to think they don't move. I think it'll be better for the economy if they don't move.
We're still dealing with domestic inflation. That's still high.
Yeah. Do I think it might reduce? Yeah, I think it might reduce.
Okay.
But if it doesn't, it might be good for me as well. I'm the one that's standing on the sidelines looking at deals.
Yeah.
Hoping there's it's a little bit harder environment.
Sounds like you're taking a 50-50 approach now. You're sitting in the middle.
Yeah. No, I'll stick with my guns.
Stick with your guns?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to be wrong though.
Well, yeah, I honestly didn't quite see this coming, in all honesty. And when I saw the data and had a bit of a look through, I was a little bit open-eyed, knowing that I think it was September 25 was when they were initially expecting to drop the OCR. Now that's, bringing that forward 9 months is huge. Well, nearly a year is huge. Whether it happens, we'll just have to wait and see. But until then, there'll be a lot more content and a lot more updates that will come from us. So look, everyone that are still with us today, appreciate you all for listening. Appreciate anyone here that has commented, and would love to hear what you guys would like to hear as well. We've got a lot of experts coming in next week. I'm sitting down with a real estate agent to talk about the market from Ray White here in Auckland. So that's going to be really quite eye-opening and interesting, and hearing from him what the front line looks like. And then maybe there'll be more changes coming soon that you and I have to get together and discuss. But until then, appreciate you as always, Simon, and
Thank you for having me.
We'll speak soon.